Hey everyone, and welcome to our session where we're going to be talking all about distributed collaboration with whiteboards and how that can really simplify your incremental planning. My name is Kat Sandin. I am the Director of Product Marketing at Appfire, and I'm super excited to be here with you guys today on this PM72 event. But before we dive too far into things, I did want to quickly just give a shout out to the reason why we're all here at this PM72 event. I'm super excited to be able to be a part of this event where we're going to be supporting the Malala Fund. So if you're not familiar with this organization, it's an international nonprofit organization that really advocates for girls' education. Their mission is to work for a world where every girl can learn and lead. So I would highly recommend visiting their website if you're not familiar with them, and maybe consider donating to the PM72 fundraising effort for the Malala Fund. It's a great organization, and we're super excited to be a part of this. So a little bit more about my company, Appfire. We have been in business since 2005. We were actually one of the original Atlassian ecosystem partners, and we really got our start in more of the services side and have since switched into more of the product and developing apps for the marketplace. Like I said, we've been in business since 2005, and today we have one of the largest portfolios of apps on the Atlassian marketplace. We have over 200,000 global installs of our products around the world. And just some fun facts about our team. We have over 500 employees across 20 different countries, which is pretty cool. And we also have over 25 different founders from Atlassian ecosystem vendor businesses within the Appfire family. So a little bit more about our product categories and our solutions. So we do have over 200 products in the Atlassian marketplace across 9 different categories that you see here on the screen. So I won't be going into all of those categories and those products on today's session, but if you're curious and want to learn more about what we do, you can visit our website, appfire.com, or you can also search for Appfire on the Atlassian marketplace. So let's go ahead and shift gears here a little bit. And what actually is incremental planning? So at its core, incremental planning is this idea of breaking down planning into smaller, more manageable chunks. So if you're working on an agile team, you're probably familiar with this concept in some form or another. It's usually based on a certain cadence, so whether that's weekly, monthly, quarterly, depending on the type of planning that you're doing. And it can take many different shapes and forms depending on the type of team you're in. So let's just say maybe you're on a team that's responsible for backlog grooming, where you incrementally replenish and reorder your up next work based on your team's priorities. And depending on how your team works, you may do this practice once a week, maybe it's bi-weekly or monthly, or maybe you perform this exercise in more of a pull-based system if that's the way that your team works, pulling work in based on your team's capacity. And I like to share this example. Actually, I borrowed all of these photos from one of my colleagues. And this one was interesting in particular because this is actually a picture of what this company called Look Ahead Planning. And it was a general contractor that was bringing together a bunch of different tradesmen that were all working on the same project. And they wanted to look ahead for the next 6 weeks and then figure out, who's going to be doing work at which times. Especially a project like this, there's a lot of interdependencies, a lot of teams that have to work together on a specific schedule and an order that the work has to be done in. And so, maybe this is something familiar to you and your organization and more of like a PI planning type of planning session where maybe you gather different teams together or, different teams across the organization, or maybe it's your entire organization getting together on a specific cadence to work towards, shared goals, figuring out the different dependencies between each team, and making sure that you can commit to the right work to get the work done. So, do any of these sound familiar to you? So, how do you know if you are incrementally planning? So maybe some of those did sound familiar to you, maybe they didn't. So here are a few ways that you can know if your team is working on an incremental plan. Maybe you're focusing on near-term priorities. You or your team or organization are working towards a shared vision. You're seeking to understand risks, so whether that's different dependencies, different schedules, things like that, making sure that you understand the risks that are involved in what you're planning. Maybe you're aiming to avoid overcommitting to work, so making sure that what you're committing to is the right amount for your team and their capacity, and then also trying to increase flexibility. So if you're increasing the flexibility with how your team works. So if you're doing any of these things, no matter how you call it, you're probably doing some form of incremental planning. So one of the things about these different planning exercises that you may have noticed from the photos that I shared before and the photo here on the screen is that all of these people are together in one room. whether it's just your team or different members of different teams from different departments within the organization, or even the entire company. Everybody is together in one room. You've got your whiteboard, you've got your sticky notes, your pens, your Sharpies, all that kind of stuff. So these big room planning exercises were really thought of as necessary to be in person to really hash things out together as a team. And in the agile world, these in-person sessions are really an essential part of how teams come together and plan and get work done. But as we all know, 2020 hit with COVID, and getting together in person was no longer an option. And so for teams and companies that were used to doing these, what we call big room planning sessions, they were actually forced to move to big Zoom planning. And so luckily for us here at Appfire, we've actually been a remote company really since we were founded. And so this wasn't a huge change for us. I'm sure there are some of you, out there that also work for a remote company. So maybe this wasn't as big of a shift for you, but for a lot of companies, they were really scratching their heads trying to figure out, how are we going to make these sessions that the in-person component was so important? How are we going to actually make sure that these are effective and, we're able to get the same kind of work done that we were originally doing when we were in person? How are we going to translate this, in-person planning into more of a distributed virtual planning session? And for many companies, they started to find, including us here at Appfire, we've known this for a while, that distributed collaboration really works. And in some cases, it can be even better than in person. And so, you may be wondering, how can an in-person event be better when it's not in person? And so really some of the things that we found within Appfire and, things that we've heard from customers is, one of the core components of a planning session, whether it's in person or remote, is making sure that you have the right people and the right practices in place. So regardless of what you're trying to do, whatever the planning session, whatever the methodology, the ceremony, whatever you want to call it, making sure that you have the right people involved and everybody's working well together. One other thing that I think is important to mention here is, with Zoom, you can really equalize the playing field. So whether it's Zoom or any sort of other, online collaboration tool, being able to equalize that playing field is really one of the key benefits of a distributed planning session. So when you're in person, sometimes people may be closer to the board, maybe they're further away, maybe they can't see or hear as well as other people. When we're all on Zoom, we're all equidistant from the screen. We're all just a mute button away, everyone's on video, and we've all got access to the same information in front of us, right there in front of us. Also, with an in-person event, obviously travel is required many times. So whether you're traveling to an office or maybe you're getting on a plane and going to a central location, maybe you've got to pack a bag, you've got to get on a plane, you've got to stay in a hotel. There's a lot of components that go into having an in-person event, and it really kind of throws you out of your normal routine. So with some kind of distributed collaboration, whether it's a Zoom planning or something like that, none of that travel or moving around comes into consideration, right? So everybody just hops on Zoom like they would any other meeting, and you can go ahead and just dive right in. And really with these with these larger planning type activities, there's really a lot more flexibility to do things in a distributed way. Typically with the sessions, they are in person and they're over, a few days, and they're really long and exhausting days, right? There's a lot of pressure to maximize the time that you're spending together in a room, trying to cram in as much as you possibly can while everybody's there together. And with Zoom, you really have much more flexibility for how you meet. Maybe you want to turn that planning session into 5 days. Maybe you only want to meet in the mornings and everybody can, go back to doing their regular work in the afternoons. There's just a lot of added flexibility with Zoom that you can't really get with an in-person session. And also, technology, there's so many different tools out there right now that make distributed collaboration easier. We've got Zoom, Slack, there's all kinds of different things to use to really make these sessions super effective. And one component, especially with a planning session, is making sure that you have some sort of visual board that everybody can work on for brainstorming and getting all of that information down. And so in today's session, we're going to talk a little bit more about how digital whiteboards can really make some of these planning sessions that you're doing distributed even more effective. And another one of the big challenges that I wanted to call out that may seem super familiar to many of you guys in the room or that are listening here over the live stream, is for a lot of these planning ceremonies, if you're working on a whiteboard and you've got your sticky notes, or even if you're doing it in a digital or a distributed environment, how do you get the plan actually to delivery, right? So this may seem familiar to some of you, taking a picture of your whiteboard with all of your sticky notes, and then it's somebody's job to manually, scribe that into whatever your delivery platform is. So whether you're using Jira or something else, making sure that work actually gets onto people's backlogs. And even with a lot of the whiteboarding tools, really there's no way to connect the planning session to the actual delivery of the work. And so that's really where Whiteboards comes in. So whether you're trying to build a strategy or lay out different objectives, maybe you're looking to organize or build roadmap, maybe you've got a team coming together to do some incremental planning, or maybe you're even just like working through how to do team delivery. You can go through these different planning exercises. Maybe it's, portfolio canvassing, PI planning, sprint planning, story mapping, retros. These probably all sound familiar to you if you're working on an agile team. And really what it is all about is taking these planning sessions and translating those results into your delivery tool. And like I said, that's really where Whiteboards shines. Whiteboards for Jira shines. It's a super easy and collaborative planning tool that focuses specifically on translating that planning to the delivery. So Whiteboards has a really deep integration with Jira, which means you can go through any of these planning exercises here on the left, and at the end of your session, or even during your session, you can ensure that things are in the right place and have the right amount of information in Jira. And not only that, you can actually start by taking issues from the backlog. If you need to do, maybe you're doing a sizing exercise, some kind of grooming, something like that. You could start by bringing those issues from Jira into Whiteboards and then go through the exercise. And then you can make sure that those changes get pushed back into Jira. So you're creating this two-way synchronization between the two products. So let's run through a few examples real quick of how Whiteboards can be used for a few of these different planning exercises. So in this first example, you'll notice we're talking about roadmaps. So if your team has an understanding of your organizational strategy, or for maybe your teams are working on a set of OKRs, things that you're hoping to accomplish during this outcome-driven planning, you can either use this existing roadmap templates. Actually, Whiteboards for Jira comes with a whole library of templates that are super useful. So you can either use one of the pre-built templates that we have, or you can easily create one yourself. Another handy feature of Whiteboards for Jira, and you'll notice it here on the screen, is you can actually connect with teammates right on the board using the built-in video and audio capabilities. So you can either work in Zoom, or you can work on video with your teammates directly from the whiteboard. Another great thing about this is really you're able to plan. You can replan, you can move things around on the board. It's super interactive and super collaborative. You can also post comments, you can draw. There's a lot of these tools and capabilities that you would expect from an advanced whiteboarding tool. Those are all possible here in our Whiteboards for Jira tool. Again, here you'll notice that we're using one of our pre-built templates. And one of the awesome things about, if you're going to be doing a sprint planning exercise is you can actually pull in work directly from Jira. You can either pull them in one by one, or you can dump it as a group in all at once, utilizing these drop zones so that, basically you're dropping things into that drop zone. And as you move things on the whiteboard, they automatically get updated in Jira. So here we're just, in this GIF, we're dropping things into different buckets to help with assigning work to different team members. And then in this next example, we're going to be going through PI planning at the program level. So here we've got a team board where they're planning different epics and features on their program board to really help their managers understand what the big picture looks like. So again, the team can be super collaborative. They can drag and drop things around. They can connect things that are dependent on each other. Here you see they're highlighting different dependencies and understanding the risks across their team. And this is the same example, but kind of, a larger PI planning exercise. All of the teams are doing that same exercise that we showed in the previous slide. So this is basically a team of teams type board, right? So we're clearly visualizing the PI objectives, and we're able to break down those different features and epics all in one shared board. And we're continuing to highlight, all the different dependencies across each of these different teams, across all of their different program boards. And so this allows us to bubble up risks to this larger board to be able to provide added visibility to leadership of, if anything is any risks are coming up. And, remember that because there is a super deep integration with Jira, you can set all of these boards up so that at the end of your sessions, the positions of work items on the whiteboard, they're making sure that they're belonging to the right teams in Jira. So, all those issues are getting assigned to the right team in Jira. They're automatically updating key fields such as the PI, the sprint, the assigned user, things like that. So this is a really handy way to, take some of those more team-specific planning exercises and show it in more of a holistic, a board that shows the entire team's plan. And that's it. So we kind of walked through a few different examples of, how to use whiteboards to really just help in your planning, taking some of that craziness and stress out of the planning and the brainstorming time, and making sure that you can take all of that great stuff that you come up with in planning and translate that into your delivery tool. So I thank you so much for spending some time with me here during this PM72 event. I did want to highlight a few other sessions from some of my other colleagues here at Appfire. Marta, I believe she spoke earlier in the day, but she talked a lot about effective workload management. So she's from our big picture team. And then also up a little bit later in the live stream, we have Gorka Puente, who is going to be talking through what the importance of a single source of truth for your PPM and how to achieve that. So he's going to be on a little bit later on in the session. And then we'll all be, around different parts of the after party. So make sure you find us, stop by, say hello, get a demo of our Whiteboards products or some of our other products during the after party. So again, thank you so much for joining and hope you enjoy the rest of the event.